Thanks so much for coming today to our webinar. Our webinar series is sponsored by Tandem Coffee, so thanks so much for their support in making these possible. So today we're going to talk about Vision Zero, which is a strategy to change how we really, approach and think about traffic safety and how to improve our roadway environment, and with ultimately the goal of eliminating traffic fatalities and severe injuries, which I know is an issue everyone on this call really cares deeply about. So we'll be able to dive in a bit more on what Vision Zero is and what is happening around the state of Maine. So just as a sort of context setting, the Bicycle Coalition of Maine, I'm Jean Sedaris, I'm the Executive Director of the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. We pay close attention to roadway safety, particularly for people biking and walking and other vulnerable road users. We track statistics and monitor sort of what the trends might be around the state. Last year in Maine, 21 pedestrians died on Maine roads, and another 230 were injured. One cyclist was killed, another 140 injured. We did see overall traffic fatalities drop last year, but that was not the case for people biking and walking. Those numbers have remained fairly steady over the last about 6 years. So that's a concerning trend that we're seeing, and really working to explore ways that we can, both as BCM and with all of your help and with many partners around the state, look at ways to bring those numbers down and make it safer for everybody that's out there using our roadways and trying to get around. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that question. What if we could eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while also increasing safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all? So that will be the question we're going to dive into today. We've got some excellent guest speakers with us today. We have Paul Drinan, who's the founder of Vision Zero Maine, and Rick Harbison, who's a senior planner and data manager for the Greater Portland Council of Governments. So we've got a lot to talk about and to dive into, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Please use the chat feature to ask questions. We will gather those and monitor those, and we'll take them at the end, but that's a great way to get your question into the queue. And if there's anything that we need to address, we'll be monitoring that from that end too. So with that, I think, Paul, we'll pass it over to you, and let me make sure you can do your presentation here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to Jean and BCM for hosting this important topic today. I'll go through pretty quickly, just give you a brief overview of where Vision Zero started, why it started, how it came to America, and how it's progressed since it arrived in America and the state of Maine. I want to leave time for Rick at GPCOG to talk about what they're doing, and then allow plenty of time for questions. So how did we get here? In 1914, New York City had a play street policy, specifically to allow children to play in the streets. Streets were closed to cars, but open specifically to delivery trucks. We all know what happened after World War II. Reconstruction around the world was focused on cars, and that trend continues today. 1949, street closures happened, otherwise known as the baby carriage blockades. In East Harlem, a coal delivery truck killed 2 children delivering a load of coal in one of these play streets. And you could Google baby carriage blockades. It's quite an interesting story. In 1953, Philadelphia residents blocked intersections, demanding stop signs because there were none and people were getting hurt. Fast forward to 1959, New York City rush hour protests demanding traffic lights. And then in 1972, a journalist, his daughter was killed riding her bicycle to school, 6-year-old child. He wrote an editorial and coined the term "Stop de Kindermoord," stop child killing in the Netherlands. And this is what began prompting the conversation about making streets safer. 1997, Sweden creates the first Vision Zero policy. And then in the year 2000, Washington State adopted what they called a Vision Zero target plan. So here in Maine, in 2020, the Maine Trails Coalition produced what they called a rail trail plan for the state of Maine. They spoon-fed this to Maine DOT, and it got noticed. The plan calls for rail corridors to be activated as active transportation corridors, also identifies corridors that should be left alone for future passenger and freight rail. You can look that up at maintrailscoalition.org. In 2022, Maine Trails Coalition produced an active transportation plan for the state of Maine. Again, Maine DOT takes notice, and they include elements of this plan in their long-range transportation plan. Later that year, MDOT produces the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and it includes something called Toward Zero. So this is the first time Maine DOT begins to have this conversation or shine a light on Vision Zero policy. And then, of course, in the fall of 2022, GPCOG rolls out their Vision Zero plan. While this is all going on, here where I live in Westbrook, there were numerous bike-friendly programs being adopted, and the people working on these committees all began to look at each other and say, well, wait a minute. We're working on all these bicycle initiatives, but Westbrook has no bike ped policy, no bike ped infrastructure, and in fact, they're a little bit hostile to this kind of stuff. So how do we do this? Again, Vision Zero being rolled out by GPCOG, I think, was a big impetus for all of this. Fast forward to today, and now we have 60 cities in America that have adopted some form of Vision Zero policy. This is just a chart of the Maine Trails Coalition Active Transportation Plan. Estimated cost is $160 million, and it would connect 2/3 of Maine's population base. So yes, the routes are mostly coastal and touch down on the biggest population bases. So it's not like we intentionally left out parts of the county in Western Maine. It's just that the plan is focused on where the people are. Again, 2023, MDOT rolls out their active transportation plan. And for the first time ever, active transportation has a seat at the table in their big 10,000-foot view for transportation planning. It's a big step forward. And this can be found on YouTube. This is the GPCOG video talking about Vision Zero. I highly recommend going to YouTube to the GPCOG channel and checking this out. Crash data for Maine for 2021. A lot of crashes, way too many fatalities and serious injuries. So Vision Zero Network is the nationwide advocacy group for this kind of stuff, and I've relied heavily on them for data, and they've been a big help. If you have any questions that can't be answered by us or BCM, please let us know. We don't really want you to have to go digging too far, but if you can't find it with us, you can certainly find more information at visionzeronetwork.org. So how do we do this stuff? You know, Vision Zero is a goal, but it doesn't really provide it's a policy, but not a strategy. So we rely on what's called the safe system approach. You've probably heard of this. There's an adjacent program called Complete Streets. One of the biggest questions we got, how are you going to pay for this stuff? This shows all the communities that received SS for All, that's the Safe Streets for All grants in 2022. And some of that money went to Maine. So Vision Zero, not a slogan, not a tagline, not a program. Vision Zero Network calls it a paradigm shift. I call it a cultural shift. We all know that Americans are infatuated with the automobile, and we are very, very wedded to what we'll call car culture. And that unfortunately extends to our transportation system, where we see the focus of transportation policy and design focused on moving cars, when it really should be focused on moving people and moving those people safely. And so we've got a big job ahead of us, but it's one that can be done. So here's how we get there. We use the safe system approach. We collaborate heavily to move out of individual silos. Of course, we rely heavily on data now, heat maps, crash data. We want to focus on equity, transportation equity. And now we have this new term, health equity. And more we're seeing the links between transportation, health, economic development, housing, and the more we can establish these connections, the better chance we have of advancing this policy. And all of these strategies are rooted in design and data and not enforcement. The days of relying on the local police department to write a ticket to prevent injuries and crashes, those days are gone. So emphasis always on transparency and accountability. So how we used to approach things as opposed to how we want to approach things in the future, instead of preventing crashes, we want to prevent death and serious injuries. We want to acknowledge that humans make mistakes. So instead of trying to change human behavior, we want to design and accommodate for human mistakes and limitations. Instead of controlling speed, we want to reduce that kinetic energy that's inherently built into today's systems, like road diets, speed bumps, bump outs at intersections, daylighting, etc. Instead of blaming individuals, we want to create more of a shared responsibility. And then, of course, instead of reacting to a crash, we want to proactively identify these things and address the risks in advance. Again, old way versus new way. There's still engineering components, but that's not really the biggest seat at the table, nor is education, nor is enforcement, nor is emergency services. We've moved right down to this safe streets for all design system to reduce speeds, create safer vehicles. Don't even get me started on the new pickup trucks, side conversation. And then, of course, safe people. I put this slide up. This is a new data point for me and very shocking to show the inequities of our current transportation system and just how deadly our current roadways are for certain populations. This is what success looks like. So this shows you the Philadelphia's Vision Zero plan for 2017 on the left. You can see they've done away with a lot of those boxes except equity. And you look at their revised plan for 2020, we still have equity, but now we see safe speeds, safe streets, safe people, safe vehicles, safety data. All of these decisions are informed with data, and they've incorporated a youth element, key to getting the next generation looped in. And this is, again, what success looks like. If we start with this safe system design, we end up with safer streets, less reliance on writing those speeding tickets and punitive measures. And at the core, we have safe and equitable streets. I would add the words for all users. Bottom center, critical collaboration. Moving over to the left, we need to work all the relationships. It says with other agencies, but I think a lot of this is going to happen at the local level, especially city councils. Mobilizing leadership to normalize this shift, this cultural change that we talked about, and then fostering those relations in the community. You or I or this group, we won't get this done by ourselves. The only way we're going to move the ball on this is to engage the people in power. We need just one leader in each community. Could be a municipal employee, probably not. Most likely a city councilor or a mayor. This is what success looks like. The Louisville Vision Zero plan, look at all these different stakeholders. They've got education, the health sector, law enforcement, economic development. They really knocked it out of the park with their collaborative effort. So I think this is a great model for moving the ball forward here in Maine. New York City. I used to live in New York City, and I rode my road bike and my mountain bike all over the place, and I never thought I'd see the day we'd see protected bike lanes. This is just a variety of strategies that are now in use in New York City. And of course, this is the preferred, sort of the gold standard, where we see a protected bike lane on the right, and then a buffered zone or door zone, some call it, and then cars acting as the barrier between pedestrians, cyclists, and moving traffic. Of course, in some areas, we don't have that parallel parking, and we don't have the luxury of creating that 3-foot buffer. And that's where we look to putting in other means of protection like armadillos, bollards, barriers, etc. This is the gold standard. Here's the data after 3 years of having protected bike lanes in New York City. Total injuries dropped by 20%. I know that I think it's Hoboken, since they instituted their Vision Zero policy, there's not been one fatality. That's it. I want to move on and allow time for questions at the end. So thanks very much. And I think at this point, we're going to hand it over to Rick.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Harbison. Professionally, I'm a planner at the Greater Portland Council of Governments. On a personal note, I thought I'd mention a few things. First is more of a confessional, but I have to admit I was a very irresponsible driver when I was growing up. I never got in a crash or hurt anyone, but like in a weird way, this work sort of feels like atonement for me. Also, I'm an avid biker, bike commute, bike for exercise, probably ride a couple thousand miles each year. So I know what it's like to feel exposed out there and to have cars fly by you within inches. And that has definitely influenced how I drive now. And lastly, I'll just mention I have 2 young daughters, 4 and 7, and they're just learning the rules of the road, as you might imagine, and learning how to bike. And it's, you know, both exciting and terrifying at the same time, and also really influences my driving and kind of how my emotions when I'm out there, I guess. Okay, so I thought I would just cover the basics real quick. I'll dispatch of this slide quickly. Greater Portland Council of Governments, we are a regional planning organization. If you're familiar with Southern Maine Planning Development Commission, Mid-Coast Council of Governments, we're all very similar organizations, kind of all of the same mold. We were established in 1969. We have a range of planning, municipal services and programs. We do economic development, sustainability, land use, transportation planning. We're also home to PACS, which stands for Portland Area Comprehensive Transportation System. Because the Greater Portland region is an urban area, it's greater than 200,000 people, we are required to have an MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization, that directs how our state and federal funds for transportation are spent in the region. So through PACS, we direct the spending of about $25 million in transportation funds annually. GPCOG, we are funded through a combination of member dues, state and federal grants. You can learn more about us at our website. On the left is the map of GPCOG member communities, and on the right is the map of our PACS region. And it's funny that you mentioned the video, Paul. I was actually just going to show it real quick. It's a short 2 to 3 minute video. Hopefully this works.
I've wrecked a few cars, but being intoxicated.
Like rear-ended us.
I was taking a bend a little too fast, and I hit the curb. Car sort of run off the road while riding my bike.
I was T-boned in an intersection. My mom.
I was hit by a car on Baxter Boulevard on a bicycle.
I know a couple people who've been hit by cars while they were biking or walking.
Car behind me stopped and it was within 2 feet of my car. The third car behind was doing 65 miles an hour. She totaled 3 cars, messed up my neck. I got 3 plates in my neck now.
Luckily, I hit them, didn't come into the side of the car, but the car in front of me, and there was a fatality that the person in the back seat behind the driver died. because of the impact.
One of my friends was just killed in a motorcycle. So he crashed his motorcycle at about 1 a.m. in June.
I lost my 23-year-old daughter in Portland, Maine on November 1st, 2016. She got hit by a distracted driver and she died 9 days later.
42,915 people were killed in motor vehicle crashes in the United States last year.
How many people do you think should be killed or seriously injured in traffic crashes?
Should be zero.
Zero. None.
Zero. I think people should be staying alive.
Well, in the perfect world, yeah, nobody gets hurt.
Zero. Nobody should have to die in a traffic accident. I would love it that nobody was have to die.
No. There really shouldn't be accidents.
I think that should be zero. Yeah, a zero is a pretty good number. I think it should be zero.
It's a daily struggle every day to live without her. So to the people out there, come together and make a change, so we have 0 deaths.
That's why we do this work. Each life is an entire world. I'm gonna show some statistics here, but yeah, just keep in mind, like each number is someone's life. These are high-level statistics. 42,000 people die each year in the US. About 155 people die each year in Maine. That's the average I pulled together for the last 5 years. That's a lot of people that we're willing to sacrifice every year. And of course, thousands more are injured. And the trends are not getting any better. This is looking at statewide totals. You can see we had like a slightly better year last year, but the year-to-year totals are pretty spiky. And as Jean mentioned earlier, pedestrian deaths are quite high still. Not seeing any obvious like multi-year downward trend that would be encouraging. So as an organization, we've fully committed to Vision Zero as a way to improve safety in our region. And for us, that started with developing Vision Zero action plans. So we have 2 action plans. There's Vision Zero Greater Portland, which is what Paul mentioned earlier. That's for the PAX region. So that's the communities in magenta, mainly like urban and suburban communities. That was led by Belinda Ray and adopted by our policy board in May of last year. We're now working on Vision Zero for rural and island communities. Those are the communities in gray. I'm the project manager for that. And it's funded through a Safe Streets and Roads for All Round 1 planning grant. We started last fall, hoping to have a draft complete in the next few months. I thought I'd just mention a few things about what makes up an action plans. They'll all look a little different based on the unique issues, the challenges associated with each community or region. But if you're following best practices and if you're following the federal highways rubric, a plan should have these key components. So just starting with safety analysis, we should have a strong analysis of crash data, should be able to identify priority locations and strategies, should have a way to measure progress over time. There should definitely be a leadership commitment. So in our case, it was getting adopted by the policy board. For a community, that might be adoption by the town council, city council. Having an advisory panel to help guide the direction of the plan, and then of course, community engagement. I thought I'd highlight some of the major elements of the plan we just completed. Of course, the overarching goal is to eliminate all traffic fatalities and serious injuries resulting from crashes on our roadways by 2045. A big piece of the plan is analyzing crash data. So, and identifying the most problematic and serious locations. So to do that, we analyzed crash data from a 6 or 7 year period. ended up being over 54,000 crashes, I believe. We created 4 maps. The one on the top left, I apologize, these are probably a little small to see, but the one on the left is our high injury network. And so that is where the worst crashes have happened. So not looking at all crashes, but looking at severe injuries and fatal crashes. Top right is the high risk network. And so that's where crashes are more likely to occur. And we base that evaluation on speed limit, number of lanes, level of congestion, those types of factors. Bottom left, community concerns. It's data that we gathered through our public engagement campaign. And then we had a transportation equity map, and that was data that was provided to us by Federal Highway. So we then took all those layers, overlapped them, synthesized them to create a new layer, which we call the critical safety corridors and intersections. So for our purposes, these are the higher priority locations from a regional perspective that help us kind of figure out where to focus our efforts. It's one thing to identify the locations, but we also wanted to provide some guidance on how to improve safety at these locations. So we have a section called tools and strategies in there. There's a part of that section called what works, and there's a long table that highlights specific safety treatments in transportation planning. They're often called countermeasures, and where those countermeasures might be used. And then those countermeasures are followed by a couple pages showing local examples. So pictures of where specific countermeasures are out and about on the ground in Greater Portland. And I thought I'd just show you a few examples of some of the more impactful countermeasures. Enhanced signing and pavement markings at intersections, up to a 27% reduction in fatal and severe injury crashes. Crosswalk visibility enhancements, up to 42% reduction in pedestrian crashes. Rectangular rapid flashing beacons, up to 40% reduction, 47% reduction in pedestrian crashes. This is, I believe, on Brighton Ave. Pedestrian refuge islands, up to 56% reduction pedestrian crashes. This is redesigned Route 1 in Falmouth. Centerline rumble strips, up to 64% reduction, head-on fatal and severe crashes. I believe that's Route 302. And then converting a signalized intersection to a roundabout is up to 78% reduction in fatal and severe crashes. And there's a couple resources out there. The FHWA has a website called Proven Safety Countermeasures. I think they have like 25 listed there. And then there's also another website, I believe it's called the Countermeasure Clearinghouse, that also allows you to like search by different, if you want to look for pedestrian countermeasures or different situations. So we kind of know what needs to happen. There's lots of improvements to be made. It's just the question of doing it. And then finally in the plan, we have a section called Taking Action, which outlines our policy decisions and actions we can take to improve safety in the region. There's 6 pages of action steps, probably too many to go through. Thought I'd just highlight a couple. Identify and apply for grants to help implement plan strategies throughout the region. That's a big focus of ours, is really continuing to apply for Safe Streets for All funding, continuing this work. And then encouraging municipalities to adopt this Vision Zero action plan and or community-specific one, which I think is important. There's lots of other good ideas in there. So we're now working on a Vision Zero plan for the rural and island communities. This is a picture of Pownell Village with Bradbury Mountain in the background. So the general outline for the rural plan will be similar to that of our previous plan, but we are going to focus more on the unique challenges and issues that face rural roads and rural areas. I a tough time pronouncing rural. But one kind of surprising statistic is that more than 70% of traffic fatalities in Maine occur on rural roads. And some of the factors that make them so dangerous, you've got long straightaways, you have high-speed two-lane roads, there's a greater potential for head-on collisions. You have sharp curves that sometimes are at the end of long straightaways, often lack visibility. Crossroad intersections, in particular, the two-way stop intersections, those can result in some really high-speed side swipe crashes and T-bones. There's village centers that often lack adequate pedestrian facilities, narrow roads with no shoulders where it's difficult to walk or bike or comfortably and safely. Rural roads are typically much darker at night. Inclement weather can be more dangerous. It's harder to plow with more roads out there. Higher speeds typically. There's the topography of rural roads, uphills, downhills, curves that can make it more dangerous, and then also more likely to encounter wildlife. Just a little bit of a non sequitur, but this is a poster that was shared with us by a New Gloucester resident. So this is the official poster or official sign for the town of New Gloucester from 1905, encouraging people to go through the village at 8 miles per hour. So, not a new problem. Unfortunately, 8 miles an hour is probably not realistic. And as we've talked about already, our cars are a lot bigger than they used to be. Last initiative I thought I'd mention is our recently funded demonstration project grant. So this is through Safe Streets for All Round 2. I assume most of you are familiar with demonstration projects by now, but essentially what they are, low-cost temporary projects. They're typically focused on bike and pedestrian safety. It's a way to try out different ideas, new designs without fully committing to them. Bike Coalition of Maine and Portland Trails have really led the way in this area, and we'll be partnering with them on this grant. This is just another picture of a painted crosswalk on Deering Ave. So overall, we were awarded a $800,000 grant when you factor in our own local match. We're planning to do 11 demonstration projects in Portland, Saco, Biddeford, Scarborough, and South Portland. And those kind of range from a small scale of, doing enhanced crossings and sidewalk buffers to a larger scale and complexity of doing median islands and even road diets in a couple places. The grant was also going to fund additional planning activities. So we have 3 road safety audits planned for the Main Mall area of South Portland. We're going to do a region-wide roundabout feasibility study. And then we're going to do in-depth intersection studies at 3 locations. So one is Allens Ave in Portland. There's another one kind of in the Main Mall area, the intersection of Westbrook Street and Western Ave. And then there's one in Scarborough, kind of near the Oak Hill neighborhood, intersection of Route 1 and Sawyer Road. And this is just some more detail about the specific projects. I won't go through them all, but as far as a timeline, we haven't started yet. We're working on it. The planning activities on the right are going to start this year. The demonstration projects, because they require a little bit more preparation and planning, we're going to begin those next summer with the idea of tackling 2 to 3 at a time over the next couple of years, most likely beginning with the easier, more straightforward ones. And this is not funded through the Safe Streets for All grant, but related. We're piloting a new camera sensor that will inform our intersection study at Allen's Corner. So we're working with a company called Viva City, and they use AI-based 3D detection techniques to provide data on speed, turning movement counts, dwell times, I think is how long vehicles are waiting at intersections, lane occupancy, and then the big advancement will be they'll provide information on near misses. And this, I think this is a video here, just shows you how it detects vehicles and pedestrians. They've been installed at a lot of locations in New York City. And these are their principal detection methodologies: proximal, time to collision, post-encroachment time. These are slides shared with us from Vision Zero. And then these are the examples of the types of near misses that it can detect. So we're excited to see how this technology works. It'll be installed later this month. It'll likely be up for a year. And then if they work well, we'll either move them to another location or potentially purchase more. And then I did want to put a plug in for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. We're now in the third round. There's two major categories. There's planning and demonstration grants and implementation grants. The implementation grants are very large sums of money, very competitive. These are construction projects, probably not likely for Maine communities to get one. The planning and demonstration grants are not as competitive. In previous rounds, every applicant has received funding that had a completed application. So it's a great source of funding for communities if you're interested in developing a Vision Zero action plan. Even if you're already covered by a regional action plan, your community is, you could use the funding to develop a more detailed, like community-specific one. You could apply to do demonstration projects. There's other planning studies. You could develop complete streets policies. You could try piloting AI camera technology. There's lots of possibilities, and I'd encourage communities to check it out. There's still time. There's 3 deadlines for this round. The first is April 4th. Second is May 16th. Third is August 29th. But if can't make it for this round, there's also, I believe, 2 more additional rounds slated. And I'll just conclude with some closing thoughts. These are my own personal musings, not necessarily that of my organization, but I do kind of think we're in the early days of Vision Zero in Maine. We're at the point where we're developing plans, we're figuring out how to incorporate Vision Zero in our work. We're bringing awareness to Vision Zero. I'm definitely grateful for Safe Streets and Roads for All. It's given us a funding source to do this work. And that's our primary focus right now, is really getting more funding to the region for this type of work. I do wonder sometimes, what do we do when Safe Streets for All runs out? It's not likely to last forever. And then lastly, just how do we grow Vision Zero in Maine? And for that, I'm very grateful for Paul's work, just bringing more attention to Vision Zero, Bike Coalition of Maine for hosting this webinar. And yeah, I'd encourage you all to support Vision Zero and road safety initiatives in your communities. That's all I've got. I'm happy to answer questions, hear people's thoughts.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate those overviews and a better understanding of sort of what already is happening in the region. The Bicycle Coalition of Maine was invited to sit on the Vision Zero Advisory Committee, which I am on, as well as the PAC's policy board, to help be a voice in that and to sort of understand that process and to continue to support it going forward. So we're really appreciative of that opportunity to be in that room and be able to do that work. The Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission in the Kittery area is also considering some Vision Zero work. There's been some talk up in the Bangor area and a few other towns. So I would say I'm really excited that there's some momentum growing in this space and a recognition that we need to do better, we can do better. And if we just, lay out those plans and have these discussions and really start to rethink how we design our transportation system, we can do it. I use that line, I think Paul used a lot too, that we have built a transportation system to move cars quickly and we need to stop, and we need to build a transportation system that moves people safely. And to really, that simple reframing really helped me kind of rethink about what we're doing and how we do it. And as you drive or walk or bike in your roads, if you think about that difference in framing, it can really help you see what the possibilities are and how we might be able to get there. So I would like to open this up for questions. Please go ahead and submit those in the chat. We had one here from Patrick about the goal date of 2045 being unacceptable. Can we be more ambitious than this? I wonder if, Rick, you can talk a little bit about how that date came about. It's about 20 years from now, or if there are any interim goals, or how you guys are going to assess that going forward, and where that date kind of comes from.
Yeah. To be honest, it's a little bit before my time in the Vision Zero project, but my understanding is that at the time, the decision around that was thinking about our region and how large of a region we have. So we have, over 200,000 people, 18 communities, thinking about how long some construction projects take. The roundabout over at USM that took 5 to 10 years. The Denny's project, that roundabout's going to take a really long time. So just thinking about how long construction projects take, how long, like, for real transformational change, that takes time. Also, I think just considering where Vision Zero started in Sweden, they're still not at zero yet. But yeah, ultimately, I think the 2045 target was decided based on our performance metrics that we're required to have every year to report to Federal Highway. I think personally, I kind of wonder about, I've thought a lot about this. I do sort of wonder about the usefulness of a target date in the first place. If you go to a construction site, it's not like they're saying, no injuries, 0 injuries by 2026. I almost wonder if, like, we should be adopting Vision Zero plans. And when you adopt the plan, 0 is your goal beginning that year. Because in some ways the year can be a little arbitrary. And yeah, I kind of feel like that's my own personal musings on the subject.
That's interesting. Yeah, like that's the goal, period. Every year, all the time, right? And when you don't hit it, you look at what could have been done better, how you can prevent it in other areas, like that. Yeah.
And there's nothing to say, that's our regional goal for PACs. There's nothing to say a community couldn't do their own Vision Zero plan, come up with a much more ambitious goal. But that'd be great. I'd love to see that.
Great. I've got another question here. Could a regional approach include a policy to reduce the size of newly purchased municipal vehicles, like the Vision Zero plan in Hoboken does? Did you guys look at that? I don't remember talking about the...
Yeah, no, I like that idea. So that is an action step in our plan, is to right size fleet vehicles. And I think a lot of municipalities are doing that as a way to reduce emissions. I know in Portland, I see a lot of like city vehicles that are electric. But I do like the idea of, potentially looking at ways to have a cooperative purchasing program for smaller vehicles. We do cooperative purchasing for things like road salt and plow blades. So maybe there's an opportunity there. Some of the other ideas in the plan that I'm remembering, I think we had one idea of using municipal vehicles for Vision Zero messaging. So just like helping to get more awareness about Vision Zero, kind of thinking about municipal vehicles as moving billboards. And then there's also, this is probably going to take a while to get to the United States, but there's movement in Europe to have intelligent speed assistance for government vehicles so there's our kind of connected vehicle technology that basically limits the speed that the vehicle is going based on speed limit. So if the speed limit is 25, then that's the speed that the vehicle can top out at. And yeah, Patrick, that sounds right. The 2045 plan. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I know at the federal level, safety standards for vehicles are only applied to people inside the vehicles. Do not have safety standards for people outside of vehicles. And that's been something that the League of American Bicyclists and others have been working to change so that our safety standards would also address people outside the vehicles, which we know with the growing size of cars and trucks, particularly trucks, how important that would be to include that in our safety standards at the national level. But that's maybe a different conversation. Okay, a couple other questions here. Let me see. Is there data about the impact of painted figures such as walkers and cyclists on roadway? So we have highlighting shared roads. So I think we might be talking about things like those sharrows, right, that have the bicycle and sort of are meant to say bicycles are here also, or might be other things that might be asking about. I'm not sure.
If there is, I haven't come across it. It might be, they have there's websites like that, Countermeasures website. There's another website I think is called Crash Modification Factors, and they do a lot of research around crashes with different road treatments. So there's potential that there might be some information on like number of crashes that are associated with sharrows, if it's increased or decreased.
Street
It's come
paint.
up in our community spokes before that sometimes drivers are confused. They think it's a bike lane when it's just indicating a shared space. So we talk a lot about the importance of making sure there's good roadway signage so that, it's just good road education for all users of what they should expect when they enter that roadway.
Yeah, street paint, when done thoughtfully, especially at an intersection, can be an effective strategy for making drivers pay attention to their surroundings. I'm not sure. I think the question was specifically about painting the form of a body on the street. I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, and there are, national standards about what can and cannot be painted on a road and what colors you're using. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that if you want to wonk out, you can wonk out as deep and as far as you want. So there's a lot there. Paul, this might be a question for you. Sort of what extent are towns and cities in Maine sharing what they're trying regarding Vision Zero, complete streets, or other things? Like, how are we learning from each other?
Great question. What I'm seeing is that slide I showed about the silos and needing to break those silos. I'm not seeing a lot of sharing. And the sharing that is happening locally or regionally, say within GPCOG or the Bangor, there's a Bangor COG, and there's a Southern Maine Planning and Development, which is similar to GPCOG. So I'm seeing conversations within those regions, but not at the state level. And I think that's something that we want to cultivate for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And having those conversations, it's something that we all can do in our own conversations with our local officials, or I know I'm on my bike ped committee locally, but sort of raising these, asking some questions and just getting conversations going that could help with that knowledge sharing and being able to point to things like the PAC's Portland Zero, Vision Zero can give some ideas and get some energy to see what we might be able to do on a broader scale in more places, and try to move a little bit of a grassroots. We can get at the towns and sort of regional level, sort of moving it up to a state level to really be able to make that change in a bigger way. To what extent have public works departments, police departments, and town and city councils been informed of Vision Zero? So a similar question, but maybe Rick, you can talk a little bit about how PACS works with a city to coordinate those efforts?
Well, certainly on the advisory panel for both plans, we have a strong mix of folks incorporating public works folks and fire, EMS personnel, and police. And then I think there's probably room for improvement in terms of coordinating on specific projects, because I think I saw another question about the size of fire trucks, because I do think that can limit our creativity and designs in some ways. Like, I almost wish that we could have like some new vehicle technology, like, you know, they got it for like the new Hummer EV and all these other crazy electric vehicles, but where the rear wheels turn so that a larger vehicle could make a sharper turn or something, because it really does impact the radius of intersections.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I do remember hearing a presentation from someone in from Carmel, Indiana, the roundabout capital. I think they mentioned that because they were having fewer crashes because of all the roundabouts, they were able to downsize some of their fleet equipment because they didn't have to have as big engines and safety equipment. So I thought that was encouraging. But yeah, I think in general, I think it's very important to bring those voices to the table. And I think that's room for improvement for us.
Side note on Carmel, Indiana, one of the big selling points there on the roundabouts for the EMS folks was that since they've built all these roundabouts, they haven't had to use the jaws of life because
that's what it was. Yeah,
crashes are happening at lower speeds, which, you know, I think that gets people's attention.
Yeah. Well, great. I think we're about to close up. I will just say thank you to both of you. Thank you to everyone to joining us. The Bicycle Coalition of Maine is a member-based organization, and it's because of support from folks like you that we're able to be at some of these tables and these conversations and be able to press for deeper action. And so we thank you for that. Encourage you all to get involved. I'll just let maybe Rick and then Paul, your final thoughts or anything you'd like to leave the group with. Put you right on the spot. I mean, Rick, you've already shared so much about your thoughts.
Yeah, I will continue to drive slowly. And yeah, I would love to keep spreading the message about Vision Zero, please.
Great, thank you. Paul?
Rick, I see a new t-shirt in your future. Drive slow, ride fast.
Yeah, there you go. I like that.
Yeah, closing thought would be, I know that BCM has a community spokes program, and if we're going to advance this Vision Zero mission statewide, it would be great to either combine Vision Zero with the spokes program or have an adjacent program like spokes for Vision Zero. But thanks all for your time. I'm really happy to have you all join us. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday, and we'll talk to you soon.